Corner, we're talking to Clarence Vold today. He's in our virtual green room. His book is called Decision Affirmed. Hey, Clarence, how are you?
I'm doing fine, thank you.
So the first thing I asked you when we talked off the air is, decision affirmed, it doesn't tell us anything, but boy, this book tells us something, and it's such an interesting read about the use of atomic bombs and Japan, etc. So what inspired you to write this book?
Well, this has been a subject that's been important to me. I've thought about it, and the 75th anniversary is coming up in August. The 50th anniversary is really a big deal, and I wanted to have an input into that discussion this year. Of course, then this virus knocked that out of the air, and I hardly hear anything all about the atomic bombs. And the title is intended to show that the decision was the correct one.
And so that there are people that absolutely, yes, that was the right decision. But then there are people that say, no, that wasn't the right decision. So let's talk about the objective of the United States when this happened.
It was not to just end the war, but to bring about peace. The First World War ended without truce. The fighting stopped. And here in Japan, it was to take out of power, to destroy the Japanese military's ability to wage war, to let Japan become a partner in the world of nations, and they have become that. They've been an ally, an important ally for us through the years, and Japan is a wonderful country. I've been stationed there, and I have enjoyed that immensely.
Yeah, so it's interesting. You're right. The idea was let's bring about peace, and now we see what's happened with Japan. And what some people question was that Japan was already defeated, so why did you have to use the atomic bombs? And I think you said it is because you didn't want it to start up again, right?
Also, by every objectively measured criteria, Japan was defeated, except in the minds of the big council, the cabinet. It was the big six: the foreign minister, the army minister of war, the Navy chief of staff, army chief of staff, and foreign affairs minister, along with the prime minister. And to them, to the army, they were not defeated. They were not defeated in their mind. And until they believed they were defeated, they were going to continue to fight. Afterwards, I've heard a philosopher say that until the military was so defeated, they felt defeated, the war would have continued. And they thought that, they had survived the atomic bomb, they had survived the fire bombings, and they survived, so they thought the nation could survive.
Yeah, and so in talking about the bomb and surviving, and et cetera, and we're speaking with Clarence Vold, Decision Affirmed is the name of the book. Some people will argue, okay, all right, I get it, Clarence, the first bomb is justified, but then why the second bomb, and what do you say about that?
The primary reason was to prove that we had more than one. I believe it was the Navy minister said, well, we've survived this bomb, they don't have any more. We can continue to fight. We can survive, and it was to prove that there were more than one, and that they didn't know how many, and that they would continue until the Japanese surrendered.
For you, in writing this and then digging up so much of the research that you did and what you knew, was it fun to put this together to prove that theory?
Yes, it was. I've been writing for many years, and now I'm almost at a point where I feel the need to write, and I write about things that are important to me, that I have a strong emotion about, and this is one of those that I do.
Yeah, and people talk about the bombs fall, and then what is the fallout from the bombs, and then also about Japan. And was it really the surrender unconditional? And you also talk about that. Why is there confusion over that?
There were people that thought, well, don't call for an unconditional surrender. And also, it's what is the definition of an unconditional surrender? There are always going to be conditions, but the conditions are set by the conquering nation. The defeated nation is not granted any concessions to get them to surrender. And it was there again. It was to make sure that it was a total defeat, that they had been defeated, and that it was time for the world to move on. And the Potsdam Proclamation made it clear that the intent was not to destroy Japan, but it was to destroy the war-making ability, and then for Japan to rejoin the world of nations, which it has successfully.
Yeah, absolutely. And you said that about, again, being an ally, now what's happened, League of Nations, Japan. But if you go all the way back in time, which, of course, in your book, you talk about what led up to the bombs, etc. How do you think Truman is viewed in history for what happened there?
At first, he was praised first. The criticism of him has increased. There are those who say that he didn't really give the order to drop the bombs. I see that on Chris Wallace's his story about it, he says that Truman was troubled by this decision, that it was a difficult decision for him to make, but it wasn't. He said that he made it without any hesitation, and it was to end the war. And
we
I think he is.
Go ahead. No, that's okay. Go ahead. You're talking about Truman, and what do you think?
I think he's. At first, he was praised, and then he was criticized more and more. And I think it's kind of probably neutral anymore. I don't think people really consider him anymore.
Yeah, that's exactly what I would say, too. When you're in the middle of it and afterwards what initially happened and then how it is perceived, et cetera, as you move from decade to decade, of course, things change. And you said this really in the beginning, and the title is perfect because it really tells you that this is what the book is. Once you get into the book, Decision Affirmed, or Speaking with Clarence Vold, you can get it on Amazon.com. What do you, and we said this in the beginning a little bit, but what do you ultimately hope people take away from reading your book?
Well, I think this is the most comprehensive single book you'll find about the war with Japan. From the beginning, when the Japanese military was taking over, throughout the years where they were expansionistic, they were invading other nations, expanding, defeating attacking Pearl Harbor to cripple the United States. There was a long, bitter war, but the world has come out better because of it.
Perfect place to end this. Clarence Vold, thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate your time.
All right, what an interesting look at what happened with the atomic bombs. And again, as Clarence says definitively, his book is different because he's saying decision affirmed and took us back in time to that. And then when you go back in time, you've got to go back to the U.S. detonating those 2 nuclear weapons over the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki on August 6th and 9th in 1945. With the consent, by the way, of the United Kingdom. That was part of what was required by the Quebec Agreement. And so then, the aftermath of the bombings, which is why there was that controversy that he and I talked about in the beginning, is because it killed between 129,000 and 226,000 people. And most of them, in fact, were civilians. And it is the only use of nuclear weapons in armed conflict. And as Clarence said, it was so definitive to bring about peace after what had happened, and then Japan turning into such a big ally of the United States. And it's interesting. So Japan surrendering to the Allies on August 15th. So think of those dates that I said, 6 days after the Soviet Union's declaration of war and the bombing of Nagasaki, those dates that I told you there in the beginning, because he's talking about looking at the anniversary of it and when it came out. And there's just still so much debate concerning what happened with those bombings. So the book, again, is called Decision Affirmed, Clarence Vold. is the author that we just spoke to. You can get it on Amazon.com.